So hi, Richard. I'm here with you today. You're Richard Grannon.
I am. Jackie, thank you very much for having me on.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background, please?
Yes, I ended up through a strange series of events, specializing in childhood trauma and particularly emotionally abusive relationships, with a particular focus on narcissistic abuse. This wasn't where I intended on ending up, but it's the way things have gone.
And I think a lot of us have done that journey where we've just started with one thing and ended up going right back to our childhood, because my personal opinion is that, the first 7 years of our life, and I know this is borne out a lot with science, a lot of research, a lot of psychology, but the first 7 years of our life are intrinsic and form our foundations for the rest of life, really. And it creates some dynamics for us that are really difficult to navigate as we get older because of divided loyalties.
Yeah, it certainly can be. They certainly can be.
Brilliant. So can I ask you then, first question that I really want to launch at you is narcissism and parenting, your little specialism. So narcissism, is it a trait or a disorder?
It's both. So when it's unfortunate because of the nature of psychology and the way we have to get into language and semantics. A narcissistic trait, or narcissism as it functions in healthy individuals, is an intrinsic trait. You should have narcissism. The Freudian psychoanalytic lineage would refer to that as healthy narcissism. It's not a term that Freud ever used, but it was implied that he felt that little children should go through a phase that eventually they pass through and it dies and drops off, that would be called narcissism, where they become very, very self-focused, no regard for other people. They just felt like they were the center of the universe. So we all have that within us. We're supposed to. That's normal and healthy. Then you can have narcissistic traits, which are not so healthy. So you've got healthy narcissism, a phase in development. Then you've got narcissistic traits in adulthood. This is not so healthy. This means little bits and pieces of childhood, usually as a result of trauma, of the fracturing of boundaries, are now following into adulthood, and we're behaving like narcissistic toddlers in our adult-to-adult interactions, and that's not great. Right the way through, along that spectrum, we get to narcissistic personality disorder. Full-blown narcissistic personality disorder is still quite rare, because it requires quite unique and highly traumatic childhood circumstances to develop fully. It means there's a hard shell that's developed around the authentic, vulnerable emotions of the child and of the child in the adult, and that all that there is in that hard shell is a false self, which is a projection. So it's a very interesting personality disorder, because what it means is you actually end up looking at a person who is not really there. There's only a shifting miasma of their various projections of who they think they need to be to draw their narcissistic supply from the other human beings around them.
And you say childhood, I mean, is there anything that you can acquire past, sort of post-7, coming up into being a young adult? I mean, I know there's not a perfect childhood. There's never a perfect childhood because it's a very subjective test. But if it was, and you acquired something later on, how would that, show up in a young adult? Is that possible too?
Excuse me, coughing. I muted that, right?
Good.
Pete Walker talks about good enough parenting. So we can have a childhood where, yes, of course, we have humans as parents and they're fallible. They have good days, bad days, moods, and whatever else. But it's good enough. There's no fracturing of the child's boundaries. They're allowed to naturally and effectively attach to their primary caregivers, to their parents, and then naturally and organically detach. There are some bumps, there's some turbulence, of course, this is normal, but it's not what we would consider traumatic. It's good enough. How then, if somebody had a good enough childhood, is it possible that they could develop narcissistic personality disorder later in life? It is. It's very rare. Either the circumstances surrounding the person need to be so all-consuming that they're reduced back to their childhood state, where what they ate, what they saw, what they heard, what they thought was completely controlled night and day for a substantial period of time, to the extent that it then infantilizes the person back to a childhood state, then yes, they can develop NPD. There have been studies that suggest that some celebrities develop context-specific narcissistic personality disorder, which I think is a reasonable proposition, which is that if you rise in fame and celebrity very quickly, if you're a nice, normal, giving person beforehand, you might end up becoming not so pleasant. But that is a very all-encompassing experience. If you're talking about A-list celebrity status, it literally will affect how you eat, how you sleep, how you live, and everything else. So yeah, it can happen later in childhood through that experience, later past childhood. Or you could be looking at somebody who's entered into either a prison or a cult, and they're literally facing torture on a daily basis. Again, that reduces us back to an infantile state. If it's prolonged enough and strong enough, the ego boundaries will break under enough pressure, and then you can induce a narcissistic personality disorder response. These are theoretical, it's hypothetical. I'm not aware of any proven cases where qualified clinicians have said, yes, this has happened, but it's theoretically possible, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the terminology good enough parenting is something that I use a lot in my legal career. You know, that's a standard that that the courts certainly adhere to and want to say. So thank you for that.
No problem.
So narcissism, is it a scale? Are there lower ends of it, higher ends of it? How does it work?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. Obviously, psychology does its best to be a science. It does suffer from a little bit of medical envy, and so it pretends that these are fixed viruses, fixed bacteria, and of course they're not. There are as many different derivations and permutations of that which we call narcissistic personality disorder as there are human beings who can develop it. It's good to remember that this is a reactive, defensive response to post-traumatic stress, to complex post-traumatic stress. When we're talking about CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress, somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, or borderline personality disorder would be in the fight, fawn vector. So it's an effort to protect the vulnerable self. Is it a sliding scale? I personally think it is. A lot of people do think it is, and it's useful to think of it in that way. But with the caveat that in order for narcissistic personality disorder to be true NPD, in my humble opinion, based on what I've seen, there does need to be this kind of this level, this area, this horizon that a person goes to in terms of their defensiveness, where they're almost irretrievable because of the false self, which is a hard shell inside of which all of the vulnerable emotions and feelings of the individual have simply died. When that has occurred in childhood, and now you're sitting in front of a 55-year-old man, or a woman who spent her whole adult life functioning on these parameters, I personally feel it's naive of the partners of people like this to think that they're going to get better. And I think it's extremely naive for mental health professionals to think that through conversing with them, they're going to convince them to change the way they fundamentally operate in the world. So sliding scale, yes, for narcissistic traits, but for NPD, full-blown malignant NPD, I would say no. Once you've got past a certain point on the sliding scale, there is no coming back.
So Richard, can you just run over what are the signs of narcissism in co-parenting?
So do you mean narcissism in the parent that you're co-parenting with, or narcissism in the children?
I suppose we can address both of those points, really, if you're happy to. So yeah, let's one at a time.
If a person is co-parenting and they're worried that what they're dealing with is narcissism, then they would be looking for the major traits. You would be looking for unusually high levels of arrogance, unusually high levels of entitlement, a tendency to deny reality in favor of upholding some sort of false image, a big tendency towards superficiality and vanity and what other people think about you, your family, the children, a lot of focus on the way the children look, but not so much focus on how the children feel. These would be the early warning signs that some degree of narcissism may have crept into that relationship. If you're worrying about it appearing in the children, it's the same thing. These obviously, children under the age of 18 cannot be diagnosed with NPD, but what we're talking about right now is narcissistic traits. So an excessive concern with appearance, entitlement, and a sense that I am special and the rules that apply to everybody else just don't apply to me. These would be warning signs for a little bit of narcissism creeping in.
Okay, that's fabulous. So is it possible to, I know we did look at this a little bit earlier and you alluded to narcissism in children being a normal part of their childhood, but is it possible to have a narcissistic child, or for a child to develop those narcissistic traits, bearing in mind you've just said NPD isn't diagnosable until they're 18?
Yeah.
They're 18?
The most honest way that I could answer this question would be to say, look, there is this overlap between philosophy and psychology. And psychology is very averse to key elements of philosophy, like values and morals. So we do have to start asking the question, when are we actually just talking about simply immoral behavior, non-clinical immoral behavior? You don't want your children engaging in non-clinical immoral behavior. So if we're asking the question, at what point should the parents start to look at intervening? At what point should they worry? If your kids are being nasty and acting in a way that is not socially acceptable, that's the moment that we need to be intervening and finding out what's going on.
Fabulous. And children presumably can respond to their environment in terms of, there's a lot of conflict going on in the home and such like, they can respond to that, not necessarily in a narcissistic way, but it can just be a behavior trait that shows up.
It could be. I mean, kids are a little bit more of a blank slate in many ways, and so they will just copy adults. I think that's one of the best rules I've ever learned about parenting and dealing with kids is children copy adults. So they'll copy the narcissistic traits even if they've not modeled the roots of where those narcissistic behavior patterns are coming from. It's still unpleasant, it's still undesirable, but it is just aping the behavior. So they've seen that behavior, being dismissive, telling lies, being aggressive, being manipulative to get what you want. And they'll go, oh, that's how daddy functions in the world. That's how mummy gets things done. I'll do the same thing. They will model us.
So you've got two parents. You've got one parent who's narcissistic or narcissistic traits, and then you've got another parent who is, let's label it, the empath. Is it possible to counterbalance the narcissistic tendencies and for that relationship to work and not necessarily impact on the child? And that was a question from one of my ladies.
No, it's not. For a start, I would say I'd defer to Sam Vaknin's sort of analogy of looking at this. There's no co-parenting with a narcissist. There's counter-parenting. So you are in a fundamentally combative position. The children to somebody with NPD are mere pawns in a broader game. The particular game they might be playing right now at this point in the children's life and at this point in your relationship, presumably if you're co-parenting, counter-parenting a relationship that's worn down, everything must be understood to take place along a timeline. And if the lady or anybody is asking that question, that's because she's in that particular point in the timeline. At this particular point in the timeline, it's highly likely that the person she's counter-parenting with wants to take revenge on her. There'll be vengeful feelings there. And we should go into that with eyes open. This is a depressing prognosis, but I'd rather have people feel shock and discomfort at what I'm saying now and be prepared for what is going to be coming down the pipe than to go in doe-eyed, wide-eyed, and then get all shocked and be saying to their friends whilst weeping, you'll never believe what he's gone and done now. You'll never believe what she said to little Timmy when I took him around the other day. So that you'll know any and all contact is the opportunity to manipulate and to abuse. Any and all contact is the opportunity to manipulate and to abuse. And that's just the way it is. It's a bitter pill to swallow. I can't imagine the distress that I can imagine, but I wouldn't want to live it, that it causes knowing somebody that they're handing their children over to somebody who's fundamentally an emotional abuser, and that they have to, by law, they're legally obligated to, just because they share DNA. That's the law. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really are in, we need to get into very pragmatic, very realistic, very protective and self-protective modalities of thought, where we start to look at minimizing the inevitable damage that will be caused.
I mean, so one of the things that I focus on in the powerful parenting program is the way that we communicate with the other parent when conflict arises. The ability to communicate and the way in which we communicate, we need to be very boundaried, and we need to be very firm and stick to those boundaries in the future. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree in theory. And I would say that, I've started this work in 2012. So I've worked for 8 years with people who are codependent fawn responders, who are helplessly addicted and conditioned to their relationships with their narcissistic partners. And so, yes, in theory, we can say be boundaried, be professional, literally minimalize all contact. So if you have a choice between saying 50 words and 5, you say 5. If you have a choice between a 5-minute conversation on the doorstep and a 30-second conversation on the doorstep, you choose the 30-second conversation on the doorstep. And whatever it is that allows you to create those circumstances, yes, including telling lies, you do that. So if you, I would stay and chat, at the handover point with the kids. I would love to stay and chat, but I really do. I just lie through your teeth to minimize the contact. Knowing, as I do though, how susceptible the partners are to emotional flashbacks and to being sucked back into this drama cycle with the abuser. I would say to people, listen, you've really got to get to a brown or black belt level status in your psychology jitsu in terms of managing your own state. If that person is in a bad mood and they're out for blood because it makes them feel better, they will target you. They don't do it permanently. Typically, they drift, they shift. If they can find an easier source of supply, an easier source of drama, they will eventually drift away and do that. But you're going to have some bad scenes with them. I can't see, if it's true NPD, they're not just going to let you get on with your life and be peaceful and happy. That provokes them, and it makes them feel less important, which creates narcissistic injury, which induces narcissistic rage, and then you will be punished. So you've got to expect that, and you've got to be prepared for it.
So I suppose that leads me on nicely to a question then now. Well, I'm thinking, is it possible to actually ameliorate that within the context of a conversation that you have with the narcissist for the child's benefit?
It's possible to ameliorate it, but I can't just give like 3 steps. You watch the video, you walk away, and you go do it. My solutions for this, because it's such an invasive attack, our defense needs to be from the ground up, and the procedures of defense are invasive. So I would need, typically in coaching with people, I have to challenge their whole moral system, even their religious worldview, because they might say, well, I'm a Christian, I'll always turn the other cheek. I'm a Buddhist, I'm to be compassionate. I'm a Muslim, I must do everything that the man said, whatever it is. And so I have to get really granular, really foundational with people and go, look, my job is to protect you from abuse. And I can't do that if you insist on running patterns of belief that don't serve you and that tell you being a victim of this nasty individual is godlike or holy or what the church wants. Or you can't have that. You've got to really look at your belief system. Can you ameliorate it? Yes, but you're going to have to do very intense work. A lot of people don't want to look at their childhood stuff, and I say, fine, I understand. Who the hell wants to go through a procedure that you know is long-winded, painful, and traumatic? But if you do resolve those issues, you will be stronger. You've got to learn non-sincere patterns of communication. You've got to learn to communicate narcissistically. They're not telling you the truth, so don't flipping tell them the truth. They're not telling you how they authentically feel, so don't flipping tell them how you authentically feel about anything. Never tell them how you really feel about the weather, about traffic, about any detail of life. You abandon all sincere communication. You keep your walls high at all moments. You know, that when they do the fighting in the UFC, they say defend yourself at all times. Once those gates have closed and you're in the cage and you're fighting, you could be attacked, and the attack will be vicious. They will try to charm you and make you think that the danger has passed, so your defenses come down, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot how sweet John could be when he's in the mood of it. And as soon as you drop your armor, that's when the poison blade goes in, and you'll be looking at psychological and emotional injuries that hurt for months or for years. Why do they do that? Just to express their power and just to express the dominance over you. So you've got to be very, very careful. And a lot of the people watching this who are struggling with it, they really need to change their worldview. Many people online are obsessed with how dangerous narcissists are. They're actually less powerful than you think, but they're probably more dangerous than you think. They're less powerful than you think, but they're more dangerous than you think. That's typically what I end up having to tell people who are stuck in these cycles of abuse.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had that personal experience myself with some of my relationships, and I would completely agree with you on that point, you know, because it is hard to manage it. And for me personally, the only way to deal with it was to get away and then manage it thereafter. And that did involve me, you know, going through a very painful journey, examining a lot of my foundations in my childhood and stripping back a lot of the beliefs and all the things that we acquire as we get older. So you do need to get to grassroots level of how you feel and understand and name the emotions to be able to tame those emotions, and then be able to deal with that emotion as it shows up in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the thing that I never want to do with people is hand out like self-defense techniques to lambs to use against wolves. If you're a lamb and a wolf comes, it doesn't matter what you know, they'll tear you to shreds. If you can be more wolf-like and less lamb-like, you have a much better chance of defending yourself from the worst elements of the attack. And so it really is about fundamental change in the belief system of people if they don't want to continue to be tortured, provoked, and, you know, wound up and triggered and all these other things that you can be by these people who've spent their whole lives cultivating the ability to induce emotional reactions in other people. They will beat you in the same way that if you get in the ring with a black belt who's been training for his whole life, there's no course you're going to do inside of 2 weeks that's going to let you to meet them at their level. You're not as good as them at their thing. So again, it's a slightly dire prognostication. It's a bit doom and gloom, but I'd rather people embrace that and go, okay, I need to take this seriously. And then I think they've really got a better chance of protecting themselves.
Yeah, I mean, doom and gloom or reality? I prefer reality, because they're, you know, if anybody's coming to either one of us for this sort of help, they're in that reality, they're stuck there. So that is their reality, and it's not nice. And that's where we can shed some light on it, I think. But certainly I like your analogy of the narcissist being dangerous and, you know, but not as powerful, because that's where, as the empath or the non-narcissist in a relationship, we can then empower the other person to actually be able to manage and ameliorate that in the future.
And this is where it's useful to break out of the clinical terminology as well. My narcissistic ex-girlfriend was powerful to me because I loved her.
Yeah.
She's not that powerful to the shop assistant that she's being rude to, because that shop assistant isn't in love with her. She's not sleeping with her. She doesn't care. So we've got to, I think it's very human to want to sort of like protect ourselves from the realities of what the situation is. But when you actually just face it head on, you go, oh, okay, that's why. So actually, it's me that's providing her with that power. In some senses, it's me that's offering up that vulnerable emotion. Ah, okay. Well, the reality is ugly, but as ugly as it is, it actually re-empowers me, because I go, oh, that's me that's doing that. She didn't do it. If I didn't offer that, she wouldn't have that power. And this is true for everybody who's been in, because we're talking about parenting, these narcissistic relationships are all rooted in love and relationships and intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's feeding the beast, isn't it?
Yes, it is, 100%.
I like that terminology, Richard, feeding the beast. Okay, so I suppose my next question then leads on nicely from that. As the non-narcissistic parent, do we ever overcompensate, in your opinion? to counterbalance the narcissism?
It depends on what you mean by overcompensation. If by overcompensation you mean, as the non-narcissistic parent, you feel guilty that you hooked up with some terrible dude that's now causing your kids to suffer, so you start spoiling your kids, then that's definitely happens, I think, 100% of the time. Because you are going to feel that guilt, you are going to feel that responsibility, and as codependents, we do have a pronounced proclivity towards guilt and shame and responsibility. So yeah, then you'll go into the "oh poor them" story inside of your head, and then you'll be like, how can I make this better? It's actually a really dangerous game to play, and I'll tell your viewers why. The correct circumstances for growing a personality with NPD is between a highly abusive distant parent and a guilty parent who spoils the child. So when you have one parent who's feeding a message to the child, you're worthless and you're an object, and the other parent who's feeling guilty says, no, you're wonderful and everything you do is great, that actually can induce NPD. So if you sense, anybody watching this, if they sense a drive in themselves to overcompensate for the other parent's bad behavior, really resist it. And remember that children need boundaries and rules more than they need kindness and friendship. They do need kindness, they do need friendship, but a child is in a state of chaos. They're still trying to learn how to figure out the world. They need rules and boundaries more. So balance the desire for kindness and friendship with rules and boundaries. If you want your child to grow up a strong, independent individual, put the rules and boundaries in early and tell them. You can say things like, if you want to overcompensate for the other parent's abuse, you overcompensate by putting a moral system in and saying, what happened? Well, daddy said this to me. Well, that's not true, is it? How do you know it's not true? Oh, I know it's not true because here's the evidence. Okay. Is it good to tell the truth? Yeah, it's good to tell the truth. Is it bad to lie? Yeah, it's bad to lie. So did he do something that we can consider bad? Yeah. Okay, that's a moral system that you're putting in there. It allows the child to philosophically differentiate and go, okay, that's my dad, that's my mum, but sometimes they do things that are immoral. So that the ultimate force in the world is not the parent anymore, it's the moral philosophical system.
And I suppose from a child's perspective, it's quite hard to differentiate that, because one of the big issues that we deal with, or one of the big issues that comes up perpetually in my legal cases, is that one parent is denigrating the other parent, creating this wedge in between the parental relationship, and that comes back down to then allegations of parental alienation. Which is a really difficult one to manage when you're dealing with all of these other dynamics. So you've got to keep it balanced. But ultimately, from my perspective, I know that a child just needs to feel safe and loved. And that's ultimately what you're doing for that child when you're providing that moral background. And I think, even, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but even narcissistic parents deeply love their children. That's one for editing, Richard.
I'm gonna leave it in. I mean, if we're talking NPD, there isn't. If we're talking full blown, the spectrum I mentioned before, all the way through to NPD, unfortunately, the evidence that they are capable of love as we would understand it in a warm-blooded mammalian sense is they literally don't have the capacity to see anybody else as outside of them. So those children are just objects inside of their internal reality. They happen to be objects they have control over. You can't love somebody like that. That's not love. That's possession. You may see, observing from the outside, sentimentality and a sort of they're simulating what they've observed in other parents. Oh, they're protective, they're very sentimental, they're very proud. If it's truly NPD, all of that is only coming from the position of narcissism. So yeah, love, unfortunately, if it's full-blown NPD, it's not a thing.
It's not going to happen. And in those circumstances, presumably, there is a risk that the relationship is going to break down entirely, which is the situation that I'm faced with in the court proceedings. Yeah.
Do you mean between the narcissistic parent and the children?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Along a long enough timeline, the true NPD will fall out with everybody. Along a long enough timeline, always, everyone, every time, for a lot of reasons. But I mean, fundamentally, it's a maladaptive personality disorder that's self-destructive, and this is one of the things that defines it as being NPD. So it might not happen until the child is in their 30s, depending on how thoroughly brainwashed they are. But yes, at some point they will fall out with them, and it will be dramatic and usually terminal. Typically they'll just never speak to the parent again, or never have the parent in their lives in that way again when they see them as they truly are, because they see a monstrous golem-like entity.
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot too. Okay, in terms of the family dynamics, Richard, assuming we've only got 2 children in any parental family unit, you've usually got the golden child, and then you've usually got the scapegoated child. What are the different dynamics, and how does that show up within the relationship?
In a narcissistic family unit, yes, typically there'll be a golden child and there'll be a black sheep. The golden child can do no wrong. The black sheep can do no good. Why does this happen? Well, it happens because when the parent has NPD, as I said before, there's no love of the children as separate to them. They're just parts of them. They're kind of buckets. They're receptacles. They're receptacles and buckets for the self-perception of the narcissist. The narcissist splits that which is bad and doesn't fit with the false self, the fake self-image, away from themselves quite naturally in their daily lives and projects it onto other people. I didn't do that. You did that. I don't lie. You tell lies. I don't manipulate. You manipulate. And then all the good stuff they keep for themselves. When they have children, they find they have this opportunity for the perfect projection mechanisms that have no boundaries, zero ability to say no. So they put all of the bad stuff in themselves into one bucket and all of the fake good stuff of themselves into another bucket. So you have black sheep, golden child. You can do no good no matter what you achieve, how far you go. You become a PhD rocket science, brain surgeon, you're still a piece of shit. The other child is a golden child. So they're drug addict, they crash cars, they, accidentally murder people whilst drunk. Whatever you want, the narcissistic parent will still fawn over them, because that's the best of them in one place, and the worst of them, which is not them, it's away from it, nothing to do with me, in another place. So you do see that dynamic play out.
And do you find with the black sheep child then that child becomes more challenging and more grounded as that child gets older?
Yeah, that child, having suffered a miserable and torturous childhood, will probably become obsessed with psychology and spirituality for the rest of their lives to try and figure out why their childhood was so full of misery and confusion.
Yeah.
They'll typically become a codependent, unfortunately, and they probably will attach to another narcissistic partner. These are the people we call the fawn responders, the codependents, the empaths, and so on. They probably were the black sheep of the family. The truth teller, the sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat, so on. The golden child typically will grow up to be very narcissistic, if not full-blown NPD, but certainly very, very narcissistic, because they've received a message in their most formative years that whatever I do is perfect. Yeah, okay, I was drunk and I ran somebody over, but everybody drinks and accidents happen. There'll be this amazingly strong capability to remove oneself from true guilt or true responsibility and true remorse. So they'll be manipulative, they'll be dismissive, they'll very, very highly likely to discard people who are no longer of use to them later in life.
Yeah, and be able to justify and rationalize all of their behavior.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a big one, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
And presumably, if you do the overcompensation, as we were discussing as parents, that is ultimately where we'll end up.
Yes, there is this overlap between the overcompensating and If the overcompensation comes from guilt, comes from a codependent, comes from somebody who has poor internal boundaries, so they feel limitless guilt and limitless shame, so they're pouring limitless kindness and limitless praise onto the child, they could accidentally be creating a kind of a second generation de facto golden child, if you like, even though they themselves are not narcissistic and they're not doing it for narcissistic reasons. All of what we're talking about is about a break from reality and splitting reality. Now, you can either split reality internally or you can split reality internally. We can have a good parent and a bad parent, or we can have a parent who split the good and bad inside of themselves. The end result of the children, unfortunately, looks very, very similar.
Wow. Okay. So Richard, when we're talking about feeling safe and children being made to feel safe, we talk about trauma bonding. Can you give us a little bit more, or give me a little bit more background on trauma bonding and how that starts?
So trauma bonding is actually a term that I dug out from cult psychology. And this goes back to 2009 when I was running a self-defense channel. And I was teaching men and women how to defend themselves. And we were discussing domestic abuse, and the Rihanna Chris Brown case came up, where he had, as people know, punched her, bitten her, kicked her, given her very, very severe injuries, and she kept on getting back with him. I watched an interview on CNN with a woman who was the representative for one of the largest women's domestic violence groups in the whole of America. And she was asked by the CNN anchor a very straightforward question: why do women keep going back? And she didn't have an answer. And at the time I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've never really heard a good answer for why anybody would go back. So then I started to do the research, and I found the concept of trauma bonding. When somebody enters a cult, they go through a love bombing phase typically. And then in order to bond the person to the cult or to the cult leader, they'll be taken through a series of very intense emotional experiences that infantilize them. How cults figured out how to do this, I do not know, because it's very good psychology. If I simultaneously abuse and rescue somebody, so I'm good and bad, remember the split, the reality split again? If I'm angel and demon in that person's subjective reality, over and over and over again, the intensity of emotions and confusion and the neuroplasticity that intense trauma induces forms a strong neurological connection between the target and me. And it's not that the neurological connection is, oh, this human is the source of pleasure and good things. It's just, this entity is important. When he speaks, you listen. You need him in your life. So I would attain almost like it's a parental role, but beyond that, a godlike status. You know, and then when people's ego boundaries are broken, they'd internalize me, and they'll be having conversations with the vision of me they have in their head, controlling everything they do, down to when they can eat, if they can eat, you know, the most intimate procedures. And that is how you trauma bond somebody inside of a cult. In normal life with a narcissist, typically, they're not just nasty all the time. Sometimes they're nice and sometimes they're not. People complain online a lot about the damaging effects of being with a covert narcissist, also called a fragile or vulnerable narcissist, who break the rules of the online narcissism community. They do apologize. They are sad when they've done something wrong. They do actually feel something approximating guilt and remorse. And so we start to think, oh, they're not that bad. They've just got PTSD. If I love them enough, they'll heal. I'll just pour more love into them until they get better. So that effectively creates a trauma bonding experience. If you're being mean and then nice and then mean and then nice, the target will typically fight to try to induce, through fawning, through submission, the nice state more than the mean state. And it puts them in a position that's like an infant with a child.
Yeah, I can see that, because it creates this unhealthy level of dependency, doesn't it? And
really, yeah.
A need, you know, huge needing you to make them better, but a huge needing you to need them as well for answers.
Unfortunately, this problem goes beyond narcissism. We actually have a cultural problem, which is that our our beliefs and our behaviors around sexual intimacy, and sexual bonding are a little bit flawed. We are somewhat obsessed with rescuer fantasies,
Yeah.
and we're obsessed with abuser fantasies. And for many of us, we just think that's what love is. And, you know, when you start to talk, I can see it when I do seminars with people. I start to say, you want to be in a happy, loving relationship? And they go, oh, yes. And I said, well, let's have a good long talk about safe attachment with another adult. And I can see their eyes glaze over because
Yeah.
it's not sexy. It's not interesting. So I'm like, so we know that you expect drama, pain, adrenaline in the bonding process. Okay, well, I can provide you with people who are always going to offer you that. They're called narcissists, and it's never a dull fucking moment. Nobody's ever said life with a narcissist was dull. It's just that it's intolerably painful. So
Yeah.
there are broader problems around that issue.
Give me the doll. I crave the doll in the predicted. I'm done with the drama. So done. And yeah, I see that because within, you know, I mean, our childhoods, all the Disney, the classical Disney films, you know, all of them are just crammed full of all this cultural and societal conditioning, aren't they?
Yes, and there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of, I think, a desire to turn people inside out a little bit, because if you're running things and you have a population to manage, it's better if you have people who just want to go to work and come home and watch TV than if you have a nation of people who are asking difficult questions, who are self-realized, who've achieved their potential. So it's better to train them to think, look, the peak of life is you get with another person, you have sex, and then you replicate. Oh, and the angelic choir music from Disney comes over. Oh, and you just think, that's infantile. I mean, that's really infantile.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people get so stuck and they're so anxious and depressed, because just forget narcissism. If you bring that amount of loading of expectation to another human being, you're guaranteed disappointment. Why? Because the person you're loading your whole life streams on is just a flipping idiot like you in socks, who gets headaches, gets confused, forgets what day of the week it is. They can't offer you an all-in-one package that resolves all the issues of your life. No other human can.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that entirely. Here's quite an interesting one. Does a narcissist ever recognize their own behavior?
Sure. Many. There was a new test for narcissism. I want to say it was the University of Minnesota. It's only 4 or 5 years old, and the new test for narcissism was and it's the most effective, quickest test there is to walk up to, what they did was they walked up to students who didn't know about NPD. They described 5 traits of narcissism, and then they said to them, would you agree with that this is you or not? And they just said, yeah. If you have NPD, and it's classic overt NPD, there's no reason for you to hide. There's no reason for you to hide from that, and just go, yeah, that's who I am. So yeah, many narcissists do fundamentally recognize that what they're doing is odd or amoral or immoral. Sam Vaknin is a good example of that. He knows exactly what he's doing, but according to him, he also struggles to control it. He struggles to control the desire to do that. So yeah, a lot of narcissists know that what they're doing is wrong.
I suppose that's where the term covert comes from, because they get clever at managing, rationalizing, and just.
Well, covert can be a strategy. So all narcissists use strategies that are covert, which means covered. I prefer to use fragile or vulnerable. It's the same thing, but when people hear covert narcissist, they'll go, oh, covert strategies. But if you're fragile or vulnerable, what that means is you have the grandiosity, but you're ashamed of it. So you have these grandiose fantasies of who you are, but then when you're faced with them, you go, ooh, who the hell do I? So there's self-doubt. So they cycle through peaks of grandiosity and then these terrible troughs of self-doubt. So they do get authentically depressed. You will see authentic depression in them. but they're not depressed for the reasons that normal human beings are. They're not depressed because life didn't work out, or they're grieving, or they're sad. They're depressed because they can't dominate the entire world the way they wish that they could. So they're actually failed narcissists, or failing. Sometimes they win, sometimes they fail.
Wow, that's an interesting concept. I never looked at it like that before. So, Richard, I think that's all the questions that I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today. I'm really, really grateful. Really pleased.
No problem at all. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.